Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. When it comes to the subject of God, we need all the help we can get. God has always been a pretty tough matter to get a handle on. Over the past 2 centuries, the situation has only gotten more difficult. How are we supposed to imagine something that cannot be imagined? If we are told that God has no image, and that any attempt at pinning some image of God is doomed to failure and the greatest form of heresy in the Torah, it doesn't leave us with many options. This is a particular problem for Judaism, being as this is the way things are frequently found in the Torah, and Jews in general have tended to make a huge deal out of this issue. In Islam also this is the case, but Muslims may not be as hung up on this as Jews are. Christians certainly have a very accessible path out of this quagmire, which is one of the main reasons that Christianity took off so rapidly in ancient times. But for Jews, this option is not available, and other ways have to be found to come to terms with an unimaginable deity. The most common way around the problem has always been to imagine something without drawing a concrete image in one's mind. For instance, there is a famous prayer that dates back to Talmudic times that addresses God as, quote, our Father, our King. Nobody suggests imagining that God is anyone's actual father or king, or even imagining God in some fatherly or kingly guise. It is simply a way to bring one's mind to the state of realizing God's personal connection with us and also God's exalted role in our lives. But even with this approach, the line between a kosher image and a forbidden one is not easy to navigate, and it is all too easy to step over that line and enter into forbidden territory. When non-Jews hear about dilemmas such as this, they often wonder why Judaism got itself into this problem to begin with. Would it have been so terrible if God had some sort of image that we could safely imagine in our minds and perhaps even depict in some physical form? But the Jewish answer to this question is always the same. It would have been that terrible or even worse, because that is the very essence of Judaism, to not have such an image. If there is any defining theological feature of Judaism, it is that there is only one God, and that one God has no image, no matter how much we wish it were not so. There is no getting around this issue in Judaism. The only options are to drop the Jewish insistence on an imageless deity or to abandon God altogether, a route that many Jews have taken. Was this a problem in biblical times? What did they do back then when it came to imaging God? We find numerous instances in the Torah of people having very clear discussions with God, speaking to God as one might speak to another person. Even somebody as tainted and as flawed as Cain, the classic and tragic man who couldn't contain his emotions and who murdered his own brother over seemingly nothing, had a deep conversation with God. It went back and forth, with God hinting to Cain what he might do to improve his situation, and Cain steadily resisting any advice and retreating deeper into his own spiral of evil. How could such a person really speak to God if we today find God so unreachable? Was God closer to real life back then, that it was simply a matter of pressing a mental button and there God would be? It does seem possible, but it also seems hard to believe. In this week's Parsha, we find what might be a hint as to how they dealt with this sticky matter. The Parsha is called Terumah, which means contribution. The entire Parsha deals with one subject, the designing of the tabernacle and its various components. It goes on and on with these different items, described in apparently complex detail, but still a bit difficult to really picture. The title of the Parsha introduces this verse that essentially asks for public contributions towards the construction of this tabernacle. These contributions would have to be substantial, as the tabernacle was quite large and many of its components contained highly intricate and expensive items. The word for tabernacle in Hebrew is mishkan. This word in turn comes from the Hebrew root that means to dwell. In modern Israel, with its recreation of the Hebrew language, this word has found a new life in common speech and in government institutions. A neighborhood is called a shchuna, derived from this very word. It is where people dwell. Neighbors are called shchenim, again, another variation of this word. The Mishkan was a dwelling place of God, a very common idea in Judaism, and one which might clash with the staunch Jewish version of monotheism that we have been describing. Most of the parts of the Mishkan have little or nothing to do with theology and really don't impinge on anybody's notions of God. There is a central table, a large lamp structure called a menorah, a couple of sacrificial altars, and an assortment of items that were used to make all these things function. There was also the entire Mishkan itself, which was a pretty good-sized tent made of 3 layers of skins and woven material, all held up by a complex arrangement of thick wooden posts positioned on bases made of different kinds of metals. There was a considerable amount of gold in the whole thing, to say nothing of silver and copper. Next week's parsha deals with the various garments that the Kohanim, the priests who officiated in the Mishkan, would wear. The garments of the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, were particularly elaborate, containing an assortment of precious stones, the likes of which were probably quite difficult to find back then. All in all, it was a very expensive and complicated project, requiring the collective efforts and contributions of the entire Israelite population. But in spite of how large and complex the whole thing was, it was still very portable. It was taken down and rebuilt at each of the stops along the 40-year journey through the wilderness that takes up much of the rest of the Torah. This nomadic group of ancient Israelites was able to build this elaborate structure many times and transport it as they trudged through the desert on their way to the Promised Land. When they finally got there, tradition has it that it found its final home in the central city of Shiloh, about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. There is a Jewish town today in the vicinity, and one can easily see the ruins of the spot where the Mishkan was believed to have been standing. There was even a couple of replicas built in recent decades. It does look like a fairly large tent, and it is not difficult to see how the entire thing functioned and how it was possible to be built and transported. It is quite amazing to see all this coming back to life in the modern age with all its digital everything. The Mishkan is a throwback to a time when things had to be made by hand and put together with the common efforts of an entire people. It could only be that way if they were to have a common belief in the deity that they worshipped. The central part of the Mishkan, and what was really the whole point of it, was the Aron, the Ark of the Covenant. This has been the subject of books and movies and investigations and countless legends. Nobody really knows what happened to it, but everybody agrees that it is no longer accessible to the Jewish people. It was a cabinet that wasn't very large, about a meter by a meter by a meter. It held the tablets that were given to Moshe on Mount Sinai and a few other things of particular importance. It was only rarely seen by anyone and was housed in the innermost chamber of the Mishkan. It was wholly beyond description and served as a kind of antenna for God's words to reach the Israelites. This unique function is described explicitly in the Torah. In the description of the cover of the ark, there is found 2 surprising statue-like things that rose from the flat surface. These were called cherubim, a word that has never really gained a translation. These were understood as angelic-looking figures that were attached to the cover with spread wings and were facing each other. They were also facing downwards towards the cover itself. The key verse describing its function reads, quote, "I will commune with you there and will speak with you from above the cover, between the 2 cherubim, which are on the ark of the testimony, that which I shall command you concerning the Israelites." The big question on all this is, why did they need this cover and these cherubim to commune with God? Couldn't they just do it within the confines of the Mishkan, or even outside of it within the confines of their own minds? Wasn't that where any communing was going on to begin with? Who needs cherubim, angelic looking or not, to be able to hear the voice of God? Cain didn't need them, so why did the Israelites? On top of all that, there is the central question of what these statue things were doing in the core of the central shrine dedicated to God. Doesn't this violate every rule in the book? These are difficult questions to answer, and there are no definitive answers to them. Perhaps the best we can do, and the most honest approach, is to say that they were necessary because by that time, communal access to God was not as easy as it had been for Cain in the privacy of his own mind. Even people who had experienced God directly on Mount Sinai needed props to re-experience that singular experience. They needed those cherubim statues to sense that there was something supernatural about their communing and that it wasn't mere drumming stuff up in their minds that wasn't quite real. By focusing their thoughts on this cover and these figures, they were able to gain some sense of the reality of the experience, that it really was happening. That voice was heard somehow between those cherubim, because that was where they were told it would be heard. It could have been heard elsewhere, but this made the impossibly difficult matter of imaging God and imagining God's voice a little bit easier. They didn't worship these statues, nor did they consider them to be representations of what God actually looked like. That much is clear from the Torah. There is no question that statues of this sort are prohibited by today's standards of Judaism. But back then, when communing with God was the central purpose of everything, this accommodation had to be made to make the impossible possible. God wasn't in the form of those cherubim, but God's voice could be imagined to be coming from between them. We are human beings, and we need all the help we can get to access the divine. Shabbat Shalom.